are you doing? Hope you're doing well. It is a beautiful Saturday, warming up a little bit, but still cold. We got more cold weather coming and potentially snow in Florida. So hopefully, my inner child is wanting to see snow in Florida. That'd be amazing. I get excited. So, and of course, it'll all be temporary because Florida, and that's just how it is. But at least it's a light snowfall. It'd be fun. Anyway, what I want to kind of talk about is what came in during the week is spiritual bypassing, right? A lot of people really don't like to do their own work, look at themselves, reflect on themselves. They're always about, what's going on outside of them, what other people are doing, pointing fingers, judgments, how they're affecting me or what they're doing to me, as the victim role. And instead of looking at ourselves in the situation that's being created, which is the effect of what's happening outside of you, it's a reflection that's being existing and creating based on where you are in your experience. And so spiritual bypassing is allowing of that to happen without you looking at yourself in reflection to, why is this happening in my life? Why does this keep going on? Why does this keep happening to me? In that experience, in that reality that you're living, that you're having the experience about it, right? And so spiritual reality, which is the condition based off where you currently are in the form, the human form of existence, which is your reality that you're creating and existing outside of yourself, right? You're projecting that outside of yourself in that reality. And so when we don't look at ourselves and we're always making about others, we never change ourselves, right? And so we are continually going on and on and on. In that evolution, it's a cycle, a path that keeps repeating itself until it becomes more known. And when they say more known, means it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger in your life manifested. Because when you keep on the same path, you're creating that, right? And so it's the existence of it reliving itself out until you become aware of it. And so it's not until you become aware of it that you can change it. And so that's the existence that we live in on all timelines, on that perspective, whatever that is for you in your life, whatever you're creating, whatever you're working on, whatever you're not doing, or whatever you're bringing into the reality by your thinking, your feeling, and your doing, right? It's a reality that you keep continuing, repeating on that level of awareness, and it's there for you, not against you or to hurt or punish or judge you, but it's there to allow you to see it, right? And that's the purpose of the repeating, the cycles, the path of generality of that situation, right? And because it's never always the same, there's only always one. So it is a repeating of it on that timeline of that experience that you keep playing out whenever you're in that moment, right? And so we are always playing out certain situations and roles over and over again until we make sense of it or until we change it and thus become aware of it. So when we're on that paradigm of, taking outside of ourselves in reflection and projecting to other people, we're in that paradigm and we have to become aware of it, wake up within it, not outside of it, right? So, okay, this is happening in my life. Why? Question myself. Why does this keep happening? Why do I keep having this experience? Why is it a continuation of the past existence, right? It's a repeating of it, a repentance, not repentance, right? People say repentance because you need to repent. No, there's no judgment or punishment. It's a repeatance of the cycle of the past, of what's happened, playing out in your reality so you can make change. And that's why it keeps happening. And the more you ignore it and make it outside of yourself, the more it grows, per se, right? The more it becomes, the more it creates, to where you are having more suffering to the point of where you need to look at it and make the change versus wanting to become aware of it in the moment in attention, creating it, right? So there's a difference between waiting until it becomes greater in suffering, your cycles and path of what you're creating in your mind, in your thoughts, in your beliefs, in your emotions, in your physicality of this existence, versus setting an intention to become present in the moment of every single moment of your life and becoming aware of what you're doing that's creating the action that's setting off the set point of what is coming out from outside of you, right? It all comes from within, your emotions, your thoughts, your beliefs. All this is what you've accepted as part of yourself and who you think you are from that point of view in this existence, in this reality, the 3D version of self, not the 5D, which is the reality of existence from the source perspective, right? The reality of higher consciousness, the awareness that we all are, but we forget because we become here in the 3D and we're separate in that reality, not who we truly are, the existence beyond this reality, but in our framework, right? In the conditioned state of being, which is the reality that we're currently living in the present moment that we've taken up in the body, which is the condition of all things of the past we've ever lived. And so the thoughts will continue, the perceptions will continue, the beliefs will continue. And though we honor it as our ancestors and we honor it as our lineage, and though we honor it as our culture, it's just the passing down of information of what we've known it to be at the present moment in time. And so in reality, it is just your elders passing down information from how they understood it to the best of their knowledge in that place that they currently were, which is not where you are because you're from a different perspective. You're a different intelligence, your different line of being, existence, reality in every generation is new, right? It's not an old perspective. It's like, I've said this example before. It's about like when you have an old system, right? We used to run off, what was it, DOS system. Now we run off Microsoft. It's like trying to put a DOS system on a Microsoft, right? It doesn't work, right? Every new generation is a new upgrade, right? If that makes sense, because we've evolved from time, but we believe it's the same generation. This is how you do it. This is what you do. This is blah, 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 but it doesn't work anymore. It's an outdated system program. And so that changes over time. And very soon, everything that we've known from the past, unless we've brought it forward into the present moment, which again doesn't work and it doesn't match and it doesn't last, it ends, right? There's an ending to all generations, and we don't continue that path unless we bring it forward. And then we try to teach them. A lot of people are like, yeah, that doesn't make sense because I'm in a whole new reality than you are. That was your past. And you can see it right now happening. Our kids, our new generations are like, are you kidding me? You want me to work? Right? Right? Because it doesn't exist anymore for them. They're in a whole different level of intelligence than what you were in the past, and that's how you thought it was. And just because it was for you doesn't mean you have to put it in place on others, right? That's your experience, that's your realization, that's your understanding of how you had to live your life at that moment in that time frame, which started the path of where we are in this generation as we are now, right? And so it's a creation of the past. And so you kind of want to learn about and understand that. But in every generation, when that comes in, the new path is set in a new stone, right? It's a new way of being, a new existence. And we're living in the millennium, right? Which is the new experience, not the old lineage, right? The old path, right? And so it changes over time. And that's why there's so many different understandings and learning systems, because you can't bring in a new generation and then try to teach them the old ways, right? It doesn't work, right? It breaks down the system. And then so it negates and realize, like, a lot of people are waking up now because this is the time of the change, right? You can't put, again, a DOS system on a Microsoft because it doesn't work. It's not compatible, right? And so although we honor that, that's a system that was of the past, the old stuff, there's new ways, new things coming in, and new experiences and new existences that's being born every day, right? And they have their own way, right? And so we don't want to try and sway them into our old consciousness. We want to encourage them into their new consciousness, who they truly are, from that point of view, and allow them to be who they truly are for themselves, right? And so from that existence, they can help be a part of the change of the way and stop bringing your stuff to them and deal with yourself in the present moment. And so when we don't deal with our stuff that's in our lives, spiritual bypass, we pass it down to our lineages, and then they have to deal with it, right? And so you're clogging up the system by not dealing with your stuff, right? And although, a lot of people are like trying to be empathetic to other people, that's just their issue. It has nothing to do with you. That's a spiritual bypass. When you're trying to do empathy for somebody, you're actually enabling them. You're not doing empathy, because you're not saying, well, maybe look at, what you've done to create that experience outside of yourself, because we always affect anything and all things around us. We're vibrational energy beings, right? There's nothing that we don't affect, right? And you can see this in different things, right? We're always being in a space, even when we're by ourselves, we have energy and vibration that we're setting off in our thoughts and our emotions and our being and our existence and what we're doing, no matter what that is, right? And so we're creating anything and all things at every time and every moment of our lives, right? And so we want to start understanding these things. We want to look at it and start doing self-study and realizing our intention, our purpose, our lives, as it is, how we really exist, right? Not just in the human form. Like, how are we a part in the play, right? We're all energy vibrational beings, right? And intelligence. And so when we don't use that intelligence, we lose it. We become disconnected from source, right? We don't have that understanding, the knowledge of how this really exists. We've been played into a play of being in this reality, this illusion of the human existence where we're sinners and ignorance, and we do stupid shit. Sorry, when we do stupid stuff, I'm gonna cut that out. But anyway, like we're just doing, things that we aren't aware of because we're separate, right? And so from that point of our conditioned state, we're in ignorance, and so we do things, right? Because we forget ourselves, and so that's what's considered to be lost when you're disconnected from source, right? And so you cut yourself off when you don't look at yourself, you don't turn in, you don't do the meditation, you don't seek within yourselves, how am I creating these cycles, right? Because if you don't learn your lessons, they continue to repeat, and you can't change your experience unless you change the way that you're being. So it's always an inward reflection. It's never an outside. The outside is just showing you where you are, what's going on, and how you're experiencing what you're being in the world. And so when we have stuff in our outside world that we don't want, we want to take a look within and not spiritual bypass, right? Because when we do that, we never fix it, right? We only keep doing it, and then it becomes bigger, and then it becomes more suffering as time goes on, and that's from lifetime and lifetime and lifetime, and generation and generation and generation, and you don't deal with your stuff, and you just pass it on to other lineages, and so they have to deal with it. And so are they going to remember everything that you went through in your life? Are they going to remember everything that you dealt with or you didn't deal with? Or no, they're not. And they're going to be like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, why is this happening to me? They're going to not know what you've done in your life or what you haven't done or what you've created, but it's going to be within them, and they're not going to know. Now, I did a video on that in the other one, and it's about like when we don't deal with our stuff, it becomes ingrained, right? It's a memory, it's a living memory, it becomes an entity. And when our generations come up, it could be the third, fourth generation down the line, they may pick it up and they become anemic or having an eating disorder. And if you're somebody that's been in the Holocaust where you were starved, and things like that, tortured, they're going to experience that in their lives, right? It's going to be a repeating factor, just as it is in each lifetime, where whatever you're grown and ingrained into when you're grown up in your environment, it's an ingrainment, right? It's what you teach your children without really realizing that you're teaching it to them, right? And so they live up in that illusion, right? And so they have that experience, they repeat it because this is what they know. They only know what they know, what they're being taught, right? And so from that perspective, we want to look at it from that point of view and understand what we're doing in the moment. Look at myself, what am I reflecting? How am I being? And what am I sharing and existing? How am I affecting other people? And it's not about not being who you are, your true self, but how are you being in the world, right? So we can be anything and all things in the world. We can be from the place of darkness or the place of light, right? Which is just love and the absence of love and all streams within it, right? Which is the consciousness that you're existing at and the energy and vibration that you're rating at. So whatever you're choosing to be in that moment is your existence outside of you. You're radiating the outside of you, which brings the resistance back to you, in a reflection of where you are, and it may not be in that exact moment, but it'll show up on a timeline at some point, and you want to be able to make that connection. Maybe yesterday I was in a bad mood, but now it's showing up tomorrow. Now I know for myself, there's at least a day or two lag, right, in my creations. And so although if today I'm in a good mood, right, I'm going to feel it in a lag, right? Because here there's time. It's going to show up. Things are going to show up in my reality that are stemming from that good mood, right? Then if I'm in a not good mood, same thing. It's going to be at least some lag where it's going to show up at some point and come back to me, right? And so it's a reflection back to us where we currently are. But we always don't make the connection because it's not always in that specific moment. There are times where it happens in that moment, but that's a recreation of the past, right? Because there is no instant karma, right? It's always been a buildup of past situations that you keep repeating in the cycles of your path of your emotions, your thoughts, your belief systems, whatever you're creating. It just happened on that timeline. It's showing up for you in that creation, so you can make the connection, if that makes sense. So it's just a repeating of timelines that you keep doing over and over again. And so if you're having a bad day and something happens and it's like, it's not an instant manifestation. It's something that you've been doing over and over again, repeating, right? And so it's not always the other person. The other thing I want to say about that is like their reflection back to you. So if you say something and they take it the way they're being, it's their trigger and they're responsible for their stuff, right? You're not. You're responsible for yours. They're responsible for yours. So it's a two-way street. It's never a one-way street, right? So, and then that brings me back to the one, right? So even though it is something that you keep repeatedly doing, your spiritual bypassing, making it about other people that you're triggering every day, all day, in how you're getting a response back to people, you have to change your framework, your mindset to make it in a different way. And it may feel not true to you, and it may only because you've been working on it in that way for so long. And so it may not be true to you, and it may feel foreign. It may feel like you're not being true to yourself. Like, this is how I am. But is it really, or is it just something that you've been trained into, right? Believing that this is who you truly are when all things are love, right? And so what is outside of love is the conditioned state, right? And so if you're not being love, you're in some sort of conditioned state, which is realization that you're not love, which is outside of itself. So you're outside of itself, disconnected from source, not your true self. And so you're playing the part. You're now in the role of the being, the creation of who you are, who you think you are, that you're playing out, which then reflects and projects outside of itself, right? It's like a time, it's like a passing down of generation, right? So in the experience of that, when you're outside of love, which is connected to source, you're in your perception, your reality, your play of the role, the model, the human, the ego, whatever you want to call it. And then from here, wherever you are in that timeline of being absent from love, which is the separation, you're radiating that out. So if you're having a bad day and you're triggering other people outside of you, you know, they're going to have a response. And so then that's going to have a response, and then that's going to have a response. So it lingers out into the world, right? And so it's a projecting of ourselves being separate from source, right? The relay of information that's going out into the field, the collective, to bring you back to where you currently are, which is your realization of your suffering, right? And from that conditioned state, you're able to make change if you become aware of it in the present moment of how I'm acting. Like, how am I being in the world? How am I showing up? Am I being the expression of love, joy, and bliss and abundance? Or am I being the victim, or playing out the suffering, right? You get to choose whatever it is that you want to be. But it's relating the information out into the world, which brings it back to you to see what it is that it is that you're being in the world. And so when we can see how we're being in the world, which is by the reflection, when we're separate from source, then we can see within ourselves how we're being in the world. And so it's kind of like the scenario. I want to give this to you. If we go from one job to the job to the job, right? Or one relationship to the next relationship to the next one, and it's always the same situation arising with a different person, but same scenario, the situation, the issue, right? It's a good indicator it's you, right? Is you're projecting outside of yourself onto the image or whatever it is that's in front of you that you're playing it out with, which is the role of your connection to it, which is the divine being in them releasing themselves into your space so you can be there with it. And so they're actually helping you in the moment. And though we want to blame, judge, and hate them for showing up for us in that way, that's what we call negative, reflection, we want to, be angry at them instead of turning in and looking at ourselves. Okay, what is my part and role in it? And how am I being in the world that's creating this situation to keep arising? Because unless we change here, then we can't change there. And we stay in the same existence, the repeating of cycles of suffering that we keep bringing to ourselves in order to replay it out, in order to see it. Because the more the suffering gets, the more we want to look at it, right? And so a lot of time people, their bodies and stuff, because energy comes to physical, right? If you don't deal with it, it becomes more physical, more feeling, more understanding, more knowing, and then it becomes more dense and condensed in your lives. And so a lot of people develop illnesses, diseases, disorders, things like that, right? And it gets passed down as that because it's never been dealt with. Now, if you deal with it and you dive deep into the energy, back to the set point of the seed that's been created within you, you can heal and change that dynamic and that awareness of it from that point of view. And then it evolves and unvolves, or unevolves, we'll just say, right? So you're bringing it back to wellness and harmony within the body, and then that changes the dynamics of health and wealth and well-being and abundance, right, for you. And so we really want to kind of look at these dynamics, right? And so when we're spiritual, bypassing it, making it about somebody else and not looking at, okay, what is my framework? What am I, and where am I living from? Is it something I learned from my parents, then passed down from me, from my friends? Is it like school? What is it that has created this? Where is this coming from within me? And dive deep into that and make that a healing, right? And change and transform it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep continuing to be that part and role in life that we just keep passing down and living out and replaying out in our own suffering, if that makes sense. And so when we can see that, and what they kind of want me to come back to is the framework of, in reference to that, we may feel like we're being an imposter, right? Because if we've only known what we've known and then we're trying to change it, this imposter syndrome may come up, that we're trying to change it. And it's like, this being will be here, like, because you've already created this entity of this existence of who you think you are, because you've just done it for so long, or it's been passed down or trained and ingrained into you, that you think that's who you are. And so whenever you try to change it, it's like going in resistance to the entity that you've created about yourself, your ego, your identity form in that reference. And that's why many people will have multiple personalities, because this is who I am, this is who I am, and then we have to change it and make it. And a lot of times that can be just different entities of ourselves that we're creating. People think it's outside of us, right, attacking us, but it's an entity that we've created for ourselves. And we live in that time frame when we're connected to it, right? Because we can project our reality and into any all things that we've ever created, right? And these are cycles and paths that we continue to live in, right? There's multiple timelines all at one time. It's not just one path that we live. This is me, human Laura, but there's many multiple different entities. Like you have your inner child, you have your wounded self, you have your creative self, you have your magician self, you have your healer. We have all these aspects of self. Carl Jung, he talked about these. We have all these different entities and things that we create, and when we allow them to take over, they multiple personalities, we're living in all of these in the creation. We can be in that place, right, depending on our life situation, but we create these entities and then we live in them based on where we are in life, right? And so what are we experiencing, right, from the past? And I'll give you one on abundance, right, that just came in. So like if you grew up in a family that was poor and there was an experience where you observed your parents, they lost their job and then they had to move and then you had to blah, 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 blah. You may feel, it may trigger in you when you lose your job, that same scenario, and then you're going to bring that memory back and you're going to play that out. You're going to repeat that cycle, if that makes sense. So I want to kind of give that as an example that they just brought in for you. But when we are, again, we may feel like, because that entity, that creation has been created, this is who I am. When we hold on to that identity, we suffer it instead of letting it pass through us, right? This is who I am, not this is my experience, right? When we want to offset that and so we don't get stuck in it, this is my experience, is what I know, but it's not true. And so when we can change that, it's awareness coming in that you are where you are, but you're not it, which is experience. You're just a part of the play from that point of view, with that aspect, that perspective, right? And so when we can change the framework that is outside of you, that you are it, that's creating it outside of you, creating it, repeating it, creating this entity for the experience that you're going to continue to live until it gets worse and worse and worse, right? And then continue to suffer it. It's not until we change that aspect of ourselves that we can make it better. And it's just becoming aware of ourselves, right? What we're doing, what we're creating. But because we've created it for so long, we may think that is real, it's true, right? When it's actually just something you're holding on to, you're not letting go because you believe it. It's just a reality of it. And so you may be feeling like an imposter because you're stepping out of it, and it may be uncomfortable for a while, and it may be like, well, why am I changing myself for another person? But you're not. It's this screen showing you where you are, right? It's not you're changing yourself for that person, that dynamic, right? Because you're affecting others, right? But it's within them too, because you're triggering something that's in them. And we won't have that experience with somebody else if it's not within them, if that makes sense. For there to be a trigger, it has to be in both beings, right? And so your experience affects them, which triggers them to respond to you, and it's a back and forth, right? An argument, right, per se, for an example. So whenever there's something in them that you see that you don't like, it's actually coming from within you, that you're not looking at yourself to like it, right? And so when you change that within yourself, the mirror reflection, then it doesn't show up outside of you anymore, right? It's a conditioned state. It's the being, it's believing in it, which you're creating in others, and then you're projecting them to respond to that situation, which they're just actually helping you. They're not trying to do it against you. But in their unconscious state, they reflect back because their intention of being who they truly are, living in their delusion, is creating that reflection back to you to reproduce that situation. And so then the both of you are actually helping each other out, right? It's not one against the other. And so we want to look at ourselves in spiritual bypassing, right? And so when you start feeling uncomfortable, that you feel like you're being inauthentic, know that you're being authentic because you're changing your back end self into towards love, right? Which is who you truly are, not your false self, which is a separation in your experience of what you're creating outside of yourself to be on the timeline, which is the difference. Now, the difference, make sure that's on, the difference is exactly what it says. It's different reference, right? Difference. There's a reason why there's different words. We've put them all together. We've kind of cut them in half and put them together for an English language that we speak, right? And so in our reference, it's different, right? And so from that perspective, we want to be able to know that whenever we are changing ourselves from who we believe or think we are, the ego, the separateness, back into alignment with love, we're going to feel that disharmony, right? Because we're separating from the false self and back into alignment, not the lineage, right? There's the alignment and the lineage, right? So you're separating yourself back into alignment with source, not the lineage, right? Because the lineage is just what's been passed down from you that you've learned and gained over time, believing in, choosing to be in it, right? And living from that perspective, which is if it's not love, then it's not existing. It's only the illusion, the perspective, right? And so from that time, we live it out. And so when we are choosing to change and look within ourselves and change it back towards love, how am I being in the world? How do I want to show up? How do I want to choose this? Then we're able to make that change and shift in consciousness and be back in alignment with source, right? So when we if we're not going to do this, then we're going to continue out the cycles in the path of ignorance, right? Which is the not knowing, right? That's all ignorance is the not knowing what is you from source, or who you are, where you are, which is being lost, right? Because when we're in all these conditioned states, then we're just being that, right? We're not living truthfully or authentically, ethically in our manner of being, which is the alignment with source. That's our true set north point, right? That's our star, North Star. I can't get that out. It's the North Star, right? That's our reflection. That's who we truly are. But we cover it up with this mask of this existence, which is set off to be whatever is in the experience that we're playing out, that we're choosing to take up because we have this as a reference point, right? It's our set stone, or it's our being or experience, the play that we're choosing to be, like this Laura form, everything that has ever been is here recorded in this, and I can choose from any of it, right? It's just sifting and sorting through that, what I want in the present moment. How do I want to be? How do I want to show up, right? Because I have all kinds of things in my lineage. I've had abuse of all kinds. I grew up in an abusive family, um, on a lot of different levels. You know, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in you know, we went from middle class down to lower class, and then we had, you know, the father abandonment. We had a lot of things going on, you know, from my childhood, and so I could choose any of those if I wanted to. But it's being in the moments that you're observing it. You have to come forward to yourself, your true self, to see it, right, in observance, and watch it and see it and choose from that. Do I want this, or do I not want it, right? And so doing the life review, which I help you do, is to look at those situations in your life. How do I want to be? And how do I become aware of it in the moment? How do I bring that to fruition of what I want versus overwrite what has been in my condition, my path of the past existence, right? And at any point in time, that can be triggered within you just by somebody else's reflection, outside of themselves. Because as we are reflecting hear ourselves out on others, they can do that to you because it's the same thing, right? From their perspective, right? Because if it's within them, it's within you. Because if they're projecting it at you, then it's back forth. It works both ways. It's what's within them is also within you, and what's within you is within them. And so we reflect back and forth to each other. That's why our connection, because we're never all on, this is the other thing that came in, was we're not on all the same timeline. We're always at a different framework, right? So each framework is at a different timeline, and that matches up whenever you're in that vicinity of the energy and vibration, right? And so those people who, when you're in a really good mood, you're flying high, will show up in your environment. When you're feeling down and depressed, those who are in that level will show up. Do you see what I'm saying? So wherever it is that you are is what's creating outside of you. It's showing up for you when you're in that moment. And the disconnect is you not knowing where you are in that moment. And so spiritual bypass is just you becoming aware of within, not outside. It's just showing the reflection, right? That's showing up for you to show you where you are, though it doesn't happen always in that moment, right? And so you have to start becoming aware of where you are on your own with intention, right? And not waiting for it to show up outside of you, because you've only trained yourself into that, right? And we've trained ourselves into waiting for that. This is the other thing, the waiting for it to show up outside of us to know where we currently are, but it's already happened, right? Because now it's in the past. You're no longer there. Your bad situation, your bad day is showing up 2 days later, right? But you're in a good mood today. And so when you trip over that situation that's coming in, it's going to put you back into that set stillness, that cycle, right? So if you can intentionally, purposely set your intent every day and all day, which is a practice, right? Not just in the morning, not just at night, it's all day. It's like, okay, this showed up. Okay, obviously I missed that one, you know, and this is part of manifesting and creating, right? And changing your life, right? So this is somewhere in my lineage, my path, my past, my previous being, what has existed, what has been before, not now. But what I'm creating now is something else. And so that's why intention, present moment practices, like Eckhart Tolle teaches, is important, right? Each teacher has something that they're teaching, right? And so from that point of view, if you put them all together as a collective, you can understand and see it as a whole, right? Everybody has their own focus of what they're teaching. Eckhart Tolle teaches presence. This teacher teaches this, you know, Yogananda taught meditation, you know, practice of being and how to live your life. Jesus and Gandhi taught their own things, peace. You know what I mean? If you put them all together, you kind of make sense. You have to be aware and observe it, right? And have that understanding. In mine, I teach what I teach, which is more of a collective teachings, energy, vibration, depending on the point of where we are as a life coach, right? And then also a life death doula, right? Because my journey has been all about life and death, you know, and everything in between, right? I came in to learn all these things, right? Since I was little, and I remember having that memory. So I've been on the journey. I've been on the other side, and so a lot of this comes from the other side because I have 2 feet in, 1 foot in this world, 1 foot in this world. It's not, I'm not grounded here in in this world, this physical. I have both, right? And that's the aspects of what I teach and I share, and I channel this information as I'm speaking and relating to you, and they share information as I'm bringing it forth to you to help to make the understanding more clearer, of different ways and different teachings, because the old teachings don't work in the present moment, right? And so it has to be upgraded into present terms, right? And so that's a collective of why there's different teachings. But if you bring it all together, you have a better understanding, if that makes sense. So don't leave it and wait for your creations to manifest and show up in the future, right? Whether you're having a good day or a bad day, or what is or what isn't. It's the present moment, right? And that's where you make change. You make change from this present moment of where you are. And it's just becoming aware of where you are. Okay, what is projected outside of me is a past experience which came from me in order to see it. And when I can see it, I can make change. But like I said, there's a delay in reflection a lot of times, and it'll show up to show you where you currently are and what you're experiencing, right? It's because there's a delay in creation, right? And it's a delay of time, which we create, which is expansion of awareness from where we are to where we were. Because on the other side, we know anything and all things at one time, right? And we don't have that separation. We come here to have that separation so we can understand it from that perspective, which is awareness of itself, that we're creating change in our being, in our existence, to have the awareness. If that makes sense. And so when we can make change, we can bring it in what we want and live more authentically outside of the conditioned state that's authentic in itself, right? Because it's an entity. When you're in the aspect of entity, you believe that's what that is. It's a creation of what you believe from that point of view that's existing within you, which is projected outside of you, if that makes sense. It's a creation of evolution from that point of view that keeps creating and reminding you that you're not in a space of love. Anything that is not in a space of love is a condition, right? And it's a great way just to remember how that is, for all of us and not just for one. And so when you're in the conditioned state, you believe it. And so you think it is. It's authentic to who you are, your frame, your Laura, your identity being. And it's not. It's a disconnect from source, which is true love, and that highest possible existence that you can be, which is the true framework, right? And so from that existence, we're separate, so we can see from different points of view, but it's a separation of time that we're creating on the timeline that it's happening to you, so you can see it in reflection back to you. And so as you are being, so are they being, right? It's a true being for them as they are for you, right? And so it's a back and forth relaying of information. That's a conditioned state that's outside of love, right? It's a conditioned being that you exist in your entity that you're creating from that point of view. And from that point of view, we create, right? And so how are we wanting to be in that moment is just bringing it back to you, not spiritual bypassing, if that makes sense. So I kind of want to end it there because I feel like it's continuing to recycle back forth from the information that they want to bring forth for this topic, and nothing else has new dropped in. I'm just connecting to see if there's anything else they want to share. But basically, yeah, spiritual bypass is, the neglect to look at yourself and make change more back to the authenticity, which is love. Authenticity is love. If you're looking for a definition of being authentic for yourself, it's love. It's your natural state. It's your being of existence. It's who you truly are from that point of view. And any existence outside of that isn't. So we want to reflect back to yourself on what it is and why you're being and how you're being in the world and what you're doing, and reflecting to bring it back to you, right? And so that existence outside of you that is sharing it with you, they want you to know that is coming from a space of love, because even though in your ignorance, as you are in ignorance, separate from love, which is source, when we're separate, we're creating that. And so when they bring that back into you, we're in the same space of ignorance, right? Just a different timeline, because we cannot connect on a timeline that is outside of ourselves, right, at that present moment. And so that's a topic that they think is important for everybody to know as well, is like, because we feel like we're all in the same timeline and we connect, and that's the only time that we're connecting is when we're on that timeline, right? So if one person, you're connecting with one person one day and then you don't connect with the person on the next day, it's because there's a shift, right? We're never always on the same timeline ever at all times, because we always fluctuate, right? And that's a balance, trying to keep that in the framework, the frame, that timeline, that frame, right? And so anytime we connect back to source, which is love, is our authentic self, right? Anything outside of it isn't, right? And so when we reflect, we're connecting to whatever is in alignment with that space that we're currently in the moment. So bringing it back to yourself, questioning, seeing, why am I creating it? Going back to the set point, right? And changing. We can never get rid of it. We can only change the dynamics of it by recreating it, which is part of the services that I help you provide for you, to help with the coaching, the life review sessions, things like that, the inner child healings, the shamanic work, the energy healing sessions. So you can always reach out if you want to book a session on that. And it's just a lot of self-reflection, self-work, mirror work, that we're doing, right? And we want to do, so we can change the paradigm that we're currently living in, where we're living from, so we can connect with what it is that we really want, right? And so if we want to manifest something that we're not, and that's because we're not on the timeline, and there's things that we need to do in order to do it, right? And it's not just projecting out into the world what we want, because the universe already knows it. You just have to speak it once, and it's already created. It's bringing it to you that is a whole nother paradigm in existence, because if you're constantly not in alignment with that, it can't come to you, and it won't until it is, right? So where you are based on that. But it's the connection of what you have outside of you that you're bringing back in, which is showing you where you are on the timeline, that you're either playing out the role in separation or you're connected with source. So again, anything that's outside of source is a disconnect, right? It's a perception belief system. And so the spiritual bypass, you want to reflect within yourself, whether it happens and shows up in a few days or in the present moment, but the practice is to be present in the moment at all times, right? Like Eckhart Tolle teaches. So you want to kind of bring that in together. And whenever there's something happening outside of you, know that it is a projection of something that has ever been, of the past. And so be aware of that and be like, okay, I missed that one. And then just turn in and reflect and find it in your body, change it, do the dynamics of healing and changing, transforming, because you can never destroy energy. You can only change it and reformulate. And that's why it can only be rewritten. It can never be changed or destroyed, right? Because everything's a set stone. We have to be able to understand and know how everything is and exists in the world from this framework and this timeline, right? In order to exist outside of this timeline, and that's the advancement of the soul, right? When you can understand everything and you've worked on it and you understand it, then you no longer need to be here in this time frame, the 3D version of self, like we call it, right? And so from that timeline, we're able to advance the soul, which then takes on a different framework on the higher conscious of level. And although you may come back in here, you're going to be set in a higher level of awareness coming back in on that timeline from different experiences, right? So it's the creation of evolution. Everything is an evolution of itself, right? It's a timeline. So hopefully that helps. So even when we're looking at, I wanted to add this, because this came in as well. So whenever we're looking at somebody's imperfections, because we think it's them when we're spiritual bypassing, whenever we're looking at a person for their imperfection, how they're being showing up, like I said, it's a reflection, but even in the reflection of another person, how they're being perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfection. Everything is as it should be. And is it that whatever somebody does to you is imperfection or perfect? It is, because when you're in that space of ignorance and you think that is who you are and who you're being, we're always being in the highest form of it, right? And so even if that means being the best, because everything is that, the highest, which is the best, you're always being the best that you can be, no matter what that is, even if you're in the separation darkness of your entity, because the entity strives to be the best at it, right? So you can always be the best at whatever it is, that wherever you are on the timeline, there never is nothing else that isn't of the best or the perfect, right? And so we are always in perfection, based on source and its realization of where it is, right? And so that's the way it's just been set. Our intelligence system is set at the degree to be perfect, to be at its best, to be on the highest level, right, to attainment. And so because it's set there for it to always attain the highest level of awareness, if you're separate in your being from source, then you're being perfect in its highest form that it can be in its imperfection, if that makes sense. And it's hard to kind of see that, but if you understand what I'm saying, what they're sharing, then you can see it from how a person can be in its highest form of ignorance when they believe that they're ignorant. Or if you're in a state of depression, you're you're seeking the highest evolution, right? Even though you're at the lowest, right? You're at the lowest in the form, but you're seeking the highest within that. So for reference, people say, okay, well, Hitler was in the highest of his being, but it was in the absence of source, which is love, right? He was at the highest of his being in his creation because he believed in it, right? He was believed in what he was doing because it was at the highest in his framework of his existence, creating what he thought was right in his conditioned state of belief system, which came from his childhood, right? You can see how he came to be in his childhood of who he was in adulthood based on his childhood of what happened to him, which was a trauma, right? And it created that entity that he lived in from that point of view and his separateness from source, which is love, the dynamic self, which relayed to him on how he was to, and the only way and things that he could do to control his life and his suffering that he went through in his lifetime, right? And from his experience, and that was in his creating on the highest, right? And so that's why he was so successful because he believed in it. So you can believe in the highest in your suffering, and you can create that in the world around you, which why is there so much suffering in the world, if that makes sense. So kind of wanted to bring that to you on that timeline because I added that into the channeled writing that I was doing. It says, when you say it is them and not you, that is incorrect. It is you and your being that you project them into yourself. The nervous system allows you to see it in them perfected in their imperfection, because even when you see them imperfect, they are perfect in their being, which is the relaying of information back to you of who you are, where you are. So even in your ignorance or whatever their ignorance is, whatever level it is, it's in the highest. So you can be in the highest level of depression, and you see people take it to the ends of the world where they're so depressed that they can't even get out of bed. That's their best being of in that experience. Does that make sense? They're playing out the role and play in their highest, because the intelligence system within us is, no matter what space that we're in, it's called to be in its highest form, right? And so it's the existence of what you're experiencing in the highest form, which is relating back to you where you currently are, which is why a lot of times we suffer it, right? Because it's not, that's why it gets to a point that if we ignore it, spiritual bypass. If we are in that space, so say you're starting out, you're starting to feel depressed and you just keep playing it out, you become at the best of it, right? You create it. And that's why, like intention, why you want to intentionally set cycles. You don't want to let your cycles and set you an intention, if that makes sense. So if you want to be an artist, you have to do it all day so you can be at your best. It's the cycles and path that you create, and whatever it is that you're being in your moment of that creation of your separateness or one with source, which is love, the highest form of being in existence, right? So you're creating on the timeline from highest to lowest, right? And so from lowest to highest, right? It's a set point. But it being in your separateness, you're at your highest because you keep creating it until you're able to see it and become aware of it and then change it. But if we continue to live in it, it's creating more and more of it's at the highest level. It's the best, right? So the actors in a play, right? You practice and practice and practice on stage with other actors, right? And till you get to perfect your character, right? If you will. That's the relating of information. And so the more that we play that character and that role in depression or whatever the case may be, the more people where you're at is going to align with it, and they're going to see it within you because it's also with them, right? In that creation, because you're bringing that into you, right? Wherever it is that you are in that creation on the highest, right? Because the more you practice something, the more you be it, right? The more you create it, the more it evolves. And unless you change it, you can't change it because you have to be aware of it in that space. That's the problem when you're in that dynamic of the entity. It's hard to see that you're separate because you think you are one with it, right? When you create more and more of your depression, you become one with it. You're in the experience, not outside of it. But being the observer from that place, you're disconnected from source, but you're in your entity, your trueness, right? In that moment. So, because there's only trueness, right? There's only truth, right? So either you're true in your entity, what you create, or your true in source, your alignment. It's basically wherever you're aligned to, right? And so understanding this, making that understandable in your consciousness awareness. Where am I in the timeline? What am I doing? Am I projecting? Am I spiritual bypassing? What am I looking at? If I don't want to be depressed, then why am I playing this role? Step out of it, right? And so how do you step out of it? Be present in the moment. Experience and let it flow through you. Don't grasp onto it, which Buddhists talk about. Your grasping creates the suffering. So it's the experience that's been playing out, and until you change it, it doesn't change, right? Because you are the one creating. You're either adding energy to it or you're taking away from it. There's subtraction, right? There's subtraction from energy, and then there's adding to energy. There's no destroying or destruction of energy. It's just changing, and it's manipulating energies and the framework of wherever it is that you are, whatever you're creating in your consciousness. But everything is perfect. So even in their perfection of their ignorance, they're being the best that they can be. And so there's no judgment on it from source's side. It's just like they're being the best that they can be in the moment. That's where that saying comes from. You can only be, and you can only, they're doing the best that you can do, right? Because you are. And that is true. You can only do what you are doing and where you are from that moment, unless you become aware of it in that time frame and make the change. And if you're not, then you're just going to keep playing out the best role that you can be at that present moment, right? And so then when we factor that in, we can find peace within ourselves. They're in their ignorance just as we are, depending on where we are in our highest, right? And so it is only from that point of view. It's us who deem it wrong and bad just because it's something that we don't want, but we're bypassing it by not seeing it in ourselves, if that makes sense. And so it's just helping us to see it, right? And so from it's that creation, but that's kind of what was part of the download writings that I got. And again, I'm going to be putting these in books. It's not going to be like a whole readable book, like a story. It's just these downloaded channeled writings that I get that I'm putting in a book. So it's like little clips of information, but I'm also adding these, like I said, to the videos to share on here. So if you are interested in something that interests you to learn more about yourself, taking a deep dive, it's something to check out on the other videos. I have other videos too as well. But basically I want to kind of add that in there because we, in our projection of others, spiritual bypassing, looking at ourselves, we judge them, right? When we're only judging ourselves because we see it in them, but we don't realize it's actually in us as well, because otherwise we wouldn't be attracted to that situation, right? And so no judgment on the other side. Source can't judge what is good and perfect because it is good, right? God made all that is good, right? So it's made its good in its being. And so we're relating to whatever is good, right? It can never not be good. It's always in our good. And so even our suffering is in our good because it brings us back to where we get to look at it and change it and make that. And so our suffering is good, right? And so we need that as a collective to be where we are so we can make change. Otherwise, there's no reason or motivation to make change. Hopefully that makes sense. And so when we can rise rise above what we think or know, and just in the absence of separation, we can be more connected with source and have love, if that makes sense. All right. And yeah, I kind of think that's pretty much it there. Yeah, if you have any questions about that, we can definitely jump on a session call. I do it online, so no matter where you are, we can do a session, right? I'm not locked into doing it in person. Actually, I prefer doing it online, basically, because I don't actually have like a set place, and so we would be meeting out, someplace in public. And to do this, I do it online. But definitely reach out if you want a session. We can definitely get that going.